All right. All right. Good day to everyone. Good day. I hope you're doing well today. And we are so thankful for you being here in this virtual experience, this amazing experience that you're going to have and remember for a long time, I believe. My name is Gabriel Adam Graves. I am the Education and Programs Coordinator for the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center. On behalf of the museum, on behalf of our museum board, and all the people who sponsor the work we do. We are so glad for you, students, being here today, and anyone else who is privileged to be in this space of learning. This is going to be something that we're going to be doing for the next couple of months in our Rooted in Justice series. And these series are a continuation of things that we did last year in our work in regards to Maryland's Racial Reconciliation Commission. Specifically, what we're doing today is going to be in partnership with one of the organizations that we've been very thankful for in the Prince George's County system. They are the Prince George's County Lynching Memorial Project. Before I go further, I want to hand it off to one of our amazing representatives who will share more about that. And I'm going to go through a couple of PowerPoint slides that will illustrate why you as students need to be connected with this work. Just to set the groundwork for everyone in this room, I believe, as one of my mentors told me, that we are the change that we've been waiting for. I repeat, we, you, I, no matter what our ages, are the change that we have been waiting for. And so with that being said, I'm going to kick it off to one of our representatives for the Prince George's County Lynching Memorial Project. And we are so excited. Please share the screen. Hello, Lila, you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay.
I don't see the screen up yet.
All right, hold up real quick.
If you're having problems, maybe I can just talk about it.
No, you're good. You're good. Here we go.
Okay. All right. Okay.
All right.
I'm going to put that on the slideshow. Well,
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so pleased to, and our group is so pleased to be a part of this webinar series. The PGC LMP is a diverse, volunteer grassroots organization with the following mission. We are an inclusive organization that works to advance the cause of reconciliation in our county by documenting the history of racial terror lynchings, advocating for public acknowledgement of these murders, and working to honor and dignify the lives of the victims. Our organization works to educate the public on the truths of our nation's continuing legacy of slavery. We want to memorialize the victims of racial terror lynchings, and we want to advance the cause of racial justice and reconciliation through mutual support and collaboration. We say the names of 4 men in our county, next slide please, who were murdered by lynching. Thomas Jurix, John Henry Scott, Michael Green, and Stephen Williams. No one was ever held accountable for their deaths. And there's no statute of limitations on murder or the search for justice. We are sponsoring a number of activities and programs to increase awareness and achieve justice in our county. Can we see the next slide?
Yes.
We will be having community remembrance projects, and we're inviting anyone that's interested to really join us in planning these projects. I mentioned we were diverse, so we are really welcome student members. We have a few, but we do need many more. Next slide, please. And these are some ways that you can get involved with us. We're really excited about our essay contest that's open to public high school students that will carry scholarship awards. So please sign up, send us a note if you're interested. Details about this contest will be available within the next few weeks. It's sponsored by the Equal Justice Initiative. As I mentioned, we have a soil collection and commemoration projects. So if you're interested in that, please let us know and we'll get you involved. We have many ways to be involved. In addition to the essay contest, we are also going to have a creative arts contest for public and private high schools. So look out for that. Both of these contests will be starting in October. So you see the email address for us, and we will also be providing Gabriel with information that he can share through the people who are on this webinar. So please keep us in mind. And if we can go to the next slide, these are ways in which you can contact us or find out information from us about our activities and our, what we hope, mutual search for justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, guys. I really hope you guys join in with that because, as I mentioned, you are the ones that you've been waiting for. We are the ones who've been waiting for. And the reason why we're having this particular series is because we live in an era where activism is critical. Social justice, civic activism in regards to racial injustices across our nation, long before the publicized murders, really lynchings of people like George Floyd, Atolia Jefferson, Breonna Taylor, so many others beyond that, Elijah McCoy, Ahmaud Arbery. There are many who are now aware of the need to be on the front lines. But the question that comes up often is, why does this matter for me at my age, the student, and what can I do to get involved? So the information you were just given is a really practical way of getting involved. One of the best ways to fight against this system that wants to erase people's memory is to remember the names of those who were victims and to never let them be forgotten. So please join on with the work of the Prince George's County Lynching Memorial Project. As we just mentioned, we're going to mention some more things in tandem that are going to be happening. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead into our main presentation today as we talk about the experiences of those who are known as contraband. And just to be clear, the people that are presenting today are stationed in Virginia, near Hampton, Virginia, but this is critical for you and I as people in Prince George's County, because many of you may have been born in Prince George's County, Maryland, but your grandparents and your great-grandparents had roots across the United States. Many of them actually came from Virginia, and they specifically came from spaces such as the places you'll be learning about today from these amazing elders who have taken the time out of their schedule to present this information with us. I want to make clear, many of you have probably seen the media images of people that are seeking refuge as it concerns people fleeing from Haiti in light of an assassination of a president and an earthquake. And this is not a new situation because there was an earthquake several years before where people were displaced and they sought refuge in the US and they were denied asylum. That story for people of African descent is not new. But when it comes to resistance, as you'll see today, having a refugee status is still going to be something that will be tied to activism on the front line. So with that being said, I don't want to steal the thunder from anyone. I want to give the floor to our amazing presenters from the Contraband Historical Society. If you guys would please open up your hearts to hear from our first presenter, Dr. Bill Wiggins. Dr. Bill Wiggins, the floor is yours.
Okay, first of all, let me say, so much to say, so little time to say it. I'm a historian. Again, Bill Wiggins. I am a member of the Contraband Historical Society and a number of other organizations. I'll spare you the involvement of myself in those. Phil Adderley is our titular head, or in name, the president of the Contraband Historical Society. He has not signed on yet at this point. Hopefully he will sign on shortly. Going to the origins of the Contraband Historical Society, but before I do that, let me indicate what a contraband is. We need to define that. Contrabands, as we came to know them as a result of the outbreak of the Civil War, were those individuals who sought refuge in Union-controlled, Union-held camps and forts. They escaped from the enslavers and were welcomed after a decision was made by Benjamin Butler Franklin, Major General Benjamin Butler Franklin. And my brother Tony Gabriel will say more about that later on. So contrabands, as they came to be known, would flood many of the camps controlled by Union forces. Let me say that the history of Africans and African Americans in what became the United States of America is not just about enslavement, slavery, or lynchings, etc. There's much more to the history, obviously, in terms of contributions and being a part of the fabric of the United States of America, and very responsible for the successes of this nation with the free labor that was given. But many Africans in America and African Americans were inventors as well. We know there were poets, there were writers. So I can go on and talk about accomplishments, but our task today is to look at rooted injustice, African American resistance. Let me just give a brief, comprehensive synopsis of origins of all of this. Resistance is as old as human existence. If we look at racial thought, it goes back in antiquity. It's ancient, if you will, from the beginning of humankind, if you will. But you'd find individuals who looked different from one another. They would clash. And then the victors would say, oh, we're stronger than them. So to the victors goes the spoils. So they must be inferior because we defeated them in battle. And if you look at the history of racial thought, it may have been rooted originally in what we call ethnocentrism, just looking different, being different, and clashes between those who looked unlike the other individual they encountered. So there would be conflict from the very beginning. We even have information, as we know, about biblical enslavement. We also know that if you look at Noah and biblical representations of the development of racial groups, and race is a loaded word. It's a four-letter term. I want to emphasize that it is a human construct. There is no validity to racial superiority. It was developed by human beings to derogate or put down other individuals. So it is a theoretical concept with no real validity, though there are those who go out of their way even today to say that some races are superior to others. The biblical piece I was referring to refers to Noah's son Ham, and the descendants of Ham are supposed to be, and I hate to use the racial term, Negroid, the Caucasoid individuals, named after his son Japhet, and then there's Shem, the Asians, named after, again, Noah's son Shem. Now, the issues that we're dealing with in what became the United States and the rest of the world, in fact, are rooted in race, racism, and discrimination. It all revolves around that, and it goes back from the beginning of time, if you will, as I indicated. Now, the history of resistance by Africans and African Americans, and let me define what I'm meaning when I say Africans and African Americans. When I say Africans in America, I'm referring to Africans before the arrival of citizenship and the end of enslavement. So Africans in America up until 1865 with the passage of the 13th Amendment. After 1868, or beginning in 1868, citizenship was bestowed on Africans in America. So then we and others came to be called African Americans. That was with citizenship in 1868 with the 14th Amendment. So that I want you to keep in mind. At any rate, from the very beginning, when enslavers, slave traders showed up in Africa, West Africa in particular, but there was an East African enslavement trade too. I want everyone to know that, but I'm not here going to talk about that East African Arab enslavement trade that went on in East Africa. I want to talk about West Africa for just a moment. We know that the Africans who landed, they didn't arrive, they landed at Point Comfort in 1619, were individuals who were captured and enslaved and placed on a vessel from Angola. The vessel they were placed on, without getting too deep in the weeds, was known as the San Juan Bautista, or the St. John the Baptist. There were some 350 of them. They left Luanda in Angola after being captured by the Portuguese. And yes, Africans did fight with one another and enslave one another, but that doesn't exonerate what ultimately happened. So that individuals who want to say, well, you enslaved one another, that's beside the point. It was all about greed and money for all individuals involved. So that vessel, that San Juan Bautista, had 350 captors who were enslaved at that point, heading for Veracruz, Mexico. The vessel was subsequently attacked by two pirate vessels, one known as the White Lion, the other known as the Treasurer. Between the two of them, they took 60 of the healthiest enslaved individuals from the San Juan Bautista, and they ended up heading to the Virginia coast. All of the coast at that time was known as Virginia, after the Virgin Queen of England. So they arrived at, the vessels arrived, and the Africans landed at Point Comfort around August 25th, 1619. The rest of it is, of course, the history of the interaction between Africans, indigenous people, and Europeans, because I don't want to leave indigenous people or the individuals who came to be called American Indians or Native Americans, etc. They were here before the Jamestown Bunch, before the Europeans arrived here and established the Jamestown colony. Actually, let's not say colony, the Jamestown borough, if you will, because it was the Virginia colony itself. Jamestown was not a colony, it was part of the Virginia colony. So at that point, we know that there was no status for enslavement. In other words, there was no or legal position or status to confer on those Africans. So they were treated in an indentured-like way, but they were still unfree. So de facto, we can say that they were enslaved. De facto means in actual fact without the force of law. So be that as it truly was, some individuals say that enslavement arrived with the landing of those 20 and odd, though there were really 30 of them, we have found, Africans who landed at Point Comfort in 1619. Resistance had started early before the capture, in fact, of those Africans in West Africa along the Gold, Slave, and Ivory Coast. Those individuals who were attacked, they resisted. So resistance has a long history. As I said, resistance is as old as human existence. You didn't just lay down and let someone destroy you, etc. It's human nature to try to fight back. We know that looking at the west coast of Africa, look at the San Juan Bautista and other vessels, many of the captive Africans, some of them would, in fact, gather together and revolt, but there were those who also committed suicide. There were African women who would throw the babies overboard rather than have them be enslaved. And we have revolts on board vessels. One that you probably have heard of is the Amistad Revolt in 1839. That was a very well-publicized one. You may have seen the movie Amistad, and that focuses on that revolt in 1839. We know that there were violent clashes on board the enslavement vessels as well. Let's get to the English colonies. We know that resistance is clear as early as 1711, and even before that in New York City. A lot of people don't know about New York City. A lot of people don't know about the resistance that subsequently occurred looking at Richmond, Virginia in 1800, or the Stono Revolt, actually 1739. So there was always resistance. And then we had, most of you know about Nat Turner's revolt in Southampton County in Virginia. And of course, that was one of the most violent and still one of the best known revolts in the history of Africans and African Americans in what was the United States of America. Now, let me stress also that Africans in America established organizations such as the Convention Movement, protest movements. They joined with the Quakers and others who were sympathetic to Africans in America. They wrote articles, they had newspapers as well. And there was always that resistance that continued. I don't want to go over my time, so Brother Graves, you let me know if I'm getting too long-winded, but let me just move forward very quickly and point out that we know that resistance to enslavement took many forms. Many of the enslaved Africans, they would run away. Let's take John Punch, for instance, in 1640 in Virginia. He and two European indentured servants, they ran away. But when they were captured, John Punch was actually told, you will serve for the rest of your life. So that was the first de jure or legal ruling indicating that the status for that individuals would be enslavement for life. And the statement also was included to indicate that all of his assigns or offspring in the future would be enslaved as well. So legal enslavement, though, by law came to Virginia in 1661. Interestingly, for your information, the first establishment of legal enslavement by law did not occur in the South, just like Jim Crow didn't start in the South, it started in the North. It was in 1641 in Massachusetts, of all places, where enslavement became legal. Resistance, as I said, to rooted injustice, to look at the theme, is something that we can point to easily. If we look at the protests after the Civil War, and I'll say a few things about that after Brother Gabriel speaks. I'm not going to get into that right now and get right to lynching. But let me just set the stage for Brother Gabriel here and indicate clearly that with the outbreak of the Civil War, and with the attack on Fort Sumter in April of 1861, and various southern states aligning themselves as pro-slavery or anti-slavery, that is pro-Confederate or pro-Union, we had obviously the most bloody war forthcoming. Over 600,000 Americans would lose their lives, greater than any war in the history of the United States. And it still haunts us today. It definitely haunts me. So with the arrival of the Civil War, various states aligned themselves, as I said, and it was in May of 1861, actually the 23rd of May, and the state of Virginia decided they would side with the Confederacy to uphold enslavement, etc. And at that point in time, individuals who will be mentioned by Brother Gabriele, many of them said, well, hey, this is an opportunity for us to hopefully escape from our enslavers, from the plantation. So with that, we know that in Hampton, Virginia, on the evening of May 21st, 1861, 3 individuals would make their way to Fortress Monroe, setting in force a series of events that would be wrapped up in the term contraband. Brother Gabriele, you're on.
Thank you, Dr. Wiggins. I want to talk a little bit about that Contraband Decision of 1861, a central event which we commemorate every year, and we believe can justly be called the beginning of the end of slavery in America. It is 1861, and our story begins with 3 individuals, Shepard Mallory, Frank Baker, and James Townsend. They are imprisoned on a farm. They are enslaved, I should say, on a farm in Hampton, Virginia. The Civil War has just started, and they are loaned by their master to the new rebel army, help them build fortifications on the shores of Hampton Road Harbor near the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. Well, it's bad enough they're enslaved. Now they have to work to help the people who are fighting to preserve slavery. And on top of that, they fear that when the army leaves, they'll be sent away with the army, far from home. So they decide that they are going to run away. But where are they going to run to? Well, close by, there's a fort, Fort Monroe, which is held by the United States Army. So the 3 men think, well, maybe there's a chance that these soldiers from the North will help us. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. For all they know, they might just be sent back and be in worse shape than they were before. Or at any rate, either way, they might never see their families again. But they decide to take that desperate gamble. They sneak away at night, go to the fort, ask to be let in. Well, the commander at Fort Monroe is a General Benjamin Butler, just recently arrived to find his new command, his new fort, surrounded by hostile territory. And on the morning of May 24th, he is told that these 3 black men showed up at the gate last night, asking to be brought in. Well, he sends for them, questions them. Here's their story. Here's how they're looking for sanctuary for protection. Well, will he give it? Remember now, the Civil War has only just started. And to most of the white folks in the North, it's a war to preserve the Union, not necessarily a war to win slavery. Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans have been elected, pledging to keep slavery out of the territories in the West, which have not yet become states. But they say they don't think they have the authority to interfere with slavery in the states where it is legal. And so to follow the law, General Butler should just send the 3 men away. But he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to send them back to help the rebel army build fortifications. And he has little time to think about it because that same day, a Virginia military officer comes to the fort under flag of truce, wanted to talk to him. Well, Butler had been a lawyer before the war and a pretty good one. So he gets a lawyer's answer ready. And he tells the Virginia militia officer that he intends to hold the 3 men. But the Virginia officer says, you are violating your own laws. The laws of the United States says you're obliged to send runaway slaves back to their masters. And Butler says, yes, that is United States law, but you Virginians have just seceded. And Virginia now claims it is no longer part of the United States. And I am under no legal obligation to a foreign country, which Virginia now claims to be. And when the Virginia officer persists in saying that a man needs to have his property returned to him, Butler says, well, you refer to these 3 men as property. All right. Well, the rules of war say that I am entitled to seize property which is being used against me by the enemy, as these 3 men were. And so I'm keeping them. So there. And that militia officer goes away empty-handed. The 3 men are told they can stay at the fort. Butler puts them to work around the fort. And then the amazing things happen. Just 2 days later, 8 more men show up at the fort gate, enslaved men running away seeking sanctuary, just like Mallory Baker and Townsend had. And the day after that, 47 more, and not just men, women, children, whole families. Butler takes them in, hoping that his superiors in Washington will agree with what he did. And it turns out the Lincoln administration supports him. And the floodgates open, just as you can see in this picture right here. Now hundreds, then thousands of enslaved people rising up, fleeing from their bondage, going to Fort Monroe seeking protection, calling it the Freedom Fort. There's so many that camps have to be established to house all these people under the protection of the army. It comes to be called Butler's Contraband of War Decision, because that was the procedure, the doctrine that he was operating under, that he was taking these people as contraband of war. And all these people fleeing from their bondage come to be called contrabands. And it doesn't happen just at Fort Monroe. From then on, wherever the United States Army marches in the South, enslaved people by the thousands rise up, fleeing from their bondage, liberating themselves, going to the United States Army for protection. And the institution of slavery begins to crumble. And this leads the way for the other things, like the formation of the United States Colored Troops, a couple 100,000 men joining the military, fighting for the freedom of their race. Leads to the Emancipation Proclamation, Abraham Lincoln using basically the same strategy that Butler did. And finally, the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, outlawing slavery. And it all began at Fort Monroe with this daring bid for freedom by these 3 brave men, Shepard Mallory, Frank Baker, and James Townsend. So as a result of that, we have these thousands of enslaved people, thousands and thousands, rising up and liberating themselves and using this opportunity to be freed from their bondage. Well, does that mean that now everything's just fine and dandy? No, it does not, because there was still a great deal of struggle and conflict and suffering and hardship yet to come, as the ongoing history of the United States will show all too well. And Dr. Wiggins, do you have anything to bring the story forward from that?
Well, I will say a few things after the following thoughts. And that is, it was with what you've just indicated in mind that descendants like Jerry Hollins and Sister Pamela Holly, Sister Cynthia Hodges, and others decided that they wanted to shine the beacon on that missing part of the history of Africans in America who escaped to Union lines. So with that in mind, since I didn't mention it earlier, the Contraband Historical Society with the late Jerry Hollins as its guiding light, along with Brother Tony Gabriele, Brother Philip Adderley, Sister Cynthia Hodges, and a number of other individuals on there well back. And I came on board a little later. They established the Contraband Historical Society and put on the map clearly in Hampton and elsewhere this history that heretofore was not really focused on very carefully. It had been mentioned in various historical works. We know that. But I want to emphasize, as the Contraband Historical Society, descendants and other contraband emphasize these three men, as Brother Gabriele pointed out, and I'll use somewhat different verbiage. They were the catalyst for all that followed thereafter. They took their freedom. It wasn't handed to them. They forced the hand of the federal government. They were the guiding lights and power players, if you will, in this. So they resisted, and they showed that they could move forward and force the federal government to do something that it had no intention of doing. So adding to this, some of you more mature age-wise individuals probably remember Paul Harvey, who a conservative commentator used to present information concerning various events. He would say, the rest of the story is. So the rest of the story is that these three men, Shepard Mallory, Frank Baker, and James Townsend, they continued to live after the end of the Civil War. Shepard Mallory, the one who was most visible, became, in fact, a constable in Hampton, Virginia. He was also a member of a church I was a member of as a deacon, Third Baptist Church, for a while in Hampton, Virginia. He also had a tomato garden area, if you will. And I say tomatoes because the heirloom tomatoes were the ones that he raised on South Willard Street. And he would live until 1924 and would be the janitor of the Union School, which no longer exists. We don't know what happened to James Townsend. He, of course, disappeared after about 1880 in the census records. But Frank Baker, his family continued to flourish, and his son actually moved the family to Connecticut, to Bridgeport, Connecticut. And the census records indicate that. So I want you all to know this, just not a matter of, oh, these three men, Shepard Mallory, Frank Baker, and James Townsend, they escaped, etc. They had a life afterwards, and they continued to contribute to Hampton, Virginia, and even in Bridgeport, Connecticut. But looking at the rest of the story once again, as Brother Gabriele pointed out, this was not the end of the story. It goes on. History is cyclical, as I always point out. It doesn't necessarily repeat itself exactly, but what? It goes like this, and many things occur that are very similar. It's kind of like, what's new under the sun? Here we go again. And I can look at it and cite rhyme and reason because I lived a great part of it. I've seen racism ebb and flow. It never went away. It was always there. So looking at the end of enslavement, of course, you found many Southern whites who were furious. We have to control these former enslaved people somehow. So you had the black codes, among others. You'd ultimately have, and the black codes meant, well, they stated that you have to have a job, that you can document, or you can be imprisoned. You also found that you would have the crop lien system developed, which was like a prison farm, if you will. There are many things of that type that went on without getting too detailed. But you also had violent organizations. The Ku Klux Klan, from the Greek word kuklos, formed in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865, connected with Nathan Bedford Forrest. It started out as a fraternity-like organization. It was a Greek organization, believe it or not. And they initially did not try to terrorize and harm the freedmen, as the former enslaved individuals have come to be called. They wanted to have fun. They dressed not in white robes at that time, but in colorful robes, red, green, etc. However, it was determined that, hey, this is a way to really put the fear in these freedmen, these former enslaved individuals. So you had some renegades within there, some rogues, and they became quite violent enough so that you'd have the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 passed to try to get rid of them. But Ku Klux Klan is still around, you all. It's not as active as it used to be, but they were very active with Birth of a Nation, the film. I'm jumping ahead, that the cinematographic wonder, if you will, that came out in 1915 by D.W. Griffith. And it was actually screened in the White House by Thomas Woodrow Wilson. And Edward White, a former associate of the Supreme Court, said, "Oh, I remember putting on my robes many times." But let me go back further to get to the issue of lynching. Of course, there were efforts to make sure that Africans, African Americans, we can call Africans in America at that point in time citizens. They got the right to vote, of course, with the 15th Amendment. And that opened up another whole can of worms, which is what? Still with us today, right? Voting rights and opportunities. And we had what was called Black Reconstruction. We had many African American politicians in the South. And Birth of a Nation, of course, focuses on that and said that they were buffoons. They didn't do anything worthwhile. But fact of the matter is they had many good programs, educational programs, help for refugees. They did a whole lot, without mentioning all the names of those individuals who were congressmen, and we had a senator as well. So moving forward, there was a determination, we've got to stop these freedmen, these Negroes, from moving forward. And with a compromise that was developed in 1876 to go into effect in 1877, all the Union troops were removed from the South. They had been providing some protection for the freedmen. It was after that that the rabid racists of the South, many of them like Pitchfork, Ben Tillman, and others, they turned on African Americans with all vigor and rigor to harm them. So we have lynchings that come into play. There were some violent clashes. There were race riots that did take place, yes. And African Americans, they fought back. And I wish I could give you more detail, but we don't have time. But as time moved on, you had more pogrom violence, P-O-G-R-O-M, where you had African Americans, they didn't have the arms, et cetera, the numbers, and they were often overwhelmed. They were often overwhelmed. But then you have later on resistance in a very clear way, retaliatory violence. So there were clashes. We don't have as many today, but there were race riots, as we know. And then we had the New Style riots where many African American communities were destroyed because African Americans couldn't get to the oppressor, and like Watts, Harlem, Detroit, etc. in the 60s and 70s. Looking at the other efforts to denigrate and destroy African Americans, which still goes on today, you had lynchings, you had lynching bees. I've seen too many photos of African American men hanging from trees, strange fruit. You've probably seen the movie Billie Holiday. strange fruit. That's what she was talking about. And it occurred in many places. It didn't occur just in the South. It occurred in the North as well. Efforts to fight that did come forward. I think of Leonidas Dyer, the Anti-Lynching Bill. The first Anti-Lynching Bill was introduced in 1918. He was from Missouri and he was a Republican. But guess what? It went nowhere. So in 1922, reintroduced, and a filibuster. We're familiar with that now, all of us, right? Especially the students who are hearing about this. We can't get anywhere because of the filibuster. So it died in the Senate. And right now, we have an Emmett Till anti-lynching bill, don't we? In the United States Congress, it passed the House, as I recall, what was it, 410-4, passed the House of Representatives. But guess what? It's stuck in the Senate. It's stuck in the Senate, which still can use the filibuster. So write your Congress people, write your senators, tell them, this filibuster stuff, it had its place. But here's the other thing to keep in mind, and I'm about ready to sum up because I'm running out of time. It was the Democrats who were doing all the filibustering then, but now there's the Republicans. It switched because the African-American population used to be strong supporters of the party of Lincoln, right? The Republican Party. But that changed with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The changed political thought of the quote Negro. And that's the title of a book. So looking at things now, you have protest marches, about George Floyd. I can go on and on, I know about Black Lives Matter. We know that there still are double standards of policing. There's so many things I'd love to talk about, but I know I have to stop. But let me say to everybody, we have to come together. We have to stop this nonsense. We're all part of the human race, and don't let individuals continue to pit one against another. You young people, as we more mature age-wise people know, we can't go on this way. We can't exist this way. You get out there and let them know that you love one another in an agape way. So I need to be quiet, I know. Brother Graves, I'm just going to move out, and I believe that Sister Holly is up.
Yes, she is. And thank you again for what you were saying. Let me interject real quickly because we want to make certain that you as students know that there's going to be a Q&A time after the next presentation. So prepare your questions if you have any and put them in the chat, and we'll have those up rather quickly. And in what was said, it's good for you to know that these connection points aren't random facts. These things do build together. As was mentioned, things are cyclical. And to make it personal, one of the biggest things that you could do once this conversation is done is to find out who is in your family tree and what stories of resistance you have as well, which is why we're going to let Mrs. Pamela Holly take the floor. Ms. Holly, would you please share more about your experiences with contraband and your ancestry, if you would, please?
Hello, my name is Pamela Holly. Just in line with the conversations that are going on, I still want the young people to realize they can protest also through the arts, and it's very important for them to learn the laws and to get with the leaders of the city, of the state. You have a voice. So just as our ancestors realized and they protested and they realized that they had the right to be free, to be individuals, you also have that right. As you see, we have been struggling and fighting all these years. And if you give up, you'll never win. So I'm encouraging you to know all your life you have to fight for what you want and what you should have. I'm going to talk about Cynthia Hodges' family. She's also a board member of the Contraband Historical Society. Her nephew, Bracy Boone, he wrote this account. He did the research on his family. And that's something else you can do. As young people, you can go find the research on your family. He talked about his great-grandfather, Charles Cross. And we don't have that much time, and I don't talk too fast, so I'm not going to go over the whole thing. But his family, he found them through the Freedmen's Bureau. And you can go and find research on your family through the Freedmen's Bureau as well. And that's how he found out they were connected to the Contraband Decision. His grandfather, his great-grandfather, Charles Cross, he was born in 1890 and he passed in 1980. He actually knew Shep Mallory. He was a friend of him. That's what they called him. We called him Shepherd Mallory, but he was a friend of him. And through this research, we were able to find more information about Shepherd Mallory and how he worked in the community. He was a carpenter, and how he helped build a church that Charles Cross and the others attended. Also, he raised his family. He became a property owner, and he lived in a house on Lincoln Street here in Hampton, where I live. And I mean, in Hampton, where I live. So you can see from how far he came from bondage to be able to be the man that was on the inside of him. And he talks about what happens on the eve of the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. He said he was proud of those that laid the foundation for the future generations. And that includes you, that includes me, that includes all of us. So we want to know how to go about it. Fight. I'm not saying fight physically. I'm just saying use all the resources that you can find to be able to have what you need, because as our historian tells us, if nothing is done, then history will just repeat itself again. And you definitely don't want that to happen. Further along in the cross-border Borden Peyton family, that's what he was talking about, how they traced that family back through the Freedmen's Bureau. The first one they found was Jeremiah Peyton. He was the great-great-grandfather of Charles Cross. He rented land from the man who previously owned him. After the war, there was a new settlement in the Butler Farm area. And just think about that. He was able to rent land from his previous owner as a free man. Joshua Cross, he was also one of the family members. He was a watchman on the Downey Farm settlement in August of 1865. He was paid $10 a month, which was considered a lot of money back then. And it's equivalent to $146 today. Within 2 years after the Civil War, both men were self-employed. And just think about that as resistance and pursuing your goals and your dreams. They were self-employed. They were able to take care of themselves. They didn't have to work for anyone else. So now I'm going to my ancestors, the Brooks family. Robert Langley Brooks, he was born in Matthews County, Virginia. He was the grandson of the slave holder. His mother's name was Nancy Brooks, and he had to be raised by foster parents because his paternal connections and maternal connections, his maternal connections was of the slave holder, so evidently they couldn't raise him. His father escaped to Canada, which was a good idea for him, and his father was mulatto, which means he was mixed race, which also means Robert Brooks was mixed race. Sometimes those that were mixed race were treated a little better because they went by the lighter the skin, the better the treatment. You're closer to a white person as far as they thought. And in many cases, you were actually, as this case, related to the slaveholder. But once he found out he was going to be sold, he escaped. he knew how to maneuver the waterways, because the researchers in the family have found out he was on an oyster farm. He escaped from Matthews County by night in a boat. He walked also on land, and he ended up at Fort Monroe. And the point I wanted to say is that he was a teenager, because he was born in 1846. And during that time, that would just make him a teenager. So this is one that you could relate to. He fought for his freedom as a teenager. And he was so young, they made him a water boy. So all he had to do was serve water. And one day when President Lincoln came by, he actually had an opportunity to serve him water. And the president shook his hand. Also, he saw Jefferson Davis imprisoned. And as the war ended and he went on to succeed in life, he worked with Albert Howe, who managed the normal school, Hampton Normal School, which is now Hampton University. And he ran an experimental farm for him. So you can see his education continued to increase. He saw a woman. She wasn't a woman then, but he had his eyes on this lady who he eventually married. Her name was Edith Batten, and she attended the Butler School, which was on the same campus as Albert Howe. And he also planted magnolia trees along the trolley roadway. And he had 17 children. They were very successful. He owned quite a bit of land. He sold land, and he bought 35 acres of land when he decided to move over across the James River to Isle of Wight County. And that's where eventually, after a long successful year, he passed away. And he and his wife and some of the children are buried over there in Isle of Wight County in Carlton, Virginia, at Campbell Chapel Church Cemetery. Thank you. These are his family. He is on the black and white picture, him and his wife and some of their children. The next picture is of his children and his grandchild and his son-in-law. As you can tell by the way they are dressed, they are very successful.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I want to go ahead and take this time. Thank you guys so much for what you've shared so far. I want to take this time to open the floor for the students. If they have any questions or anything they want to ask you guys in the time that we have. Let me put in a brief little note here again, because it'll be very easy to walk away from this space overwhelmed. But the reason that we gave this information from elders is twofold. Number one, once a generation before you passes away, if they haven't told you certain things that happen, that information goes with them. So it's really critical as people who are passionate for civic activism to know the stories of those who have come before you. It's also critical for elders to be in contact with the students who are the representation of what is to come, so that we can actually influence and encourage one another. So they share with you some pretty heavy information. And I would encourage you all to research the history of contrabands in your local areas of living, whether it be in your immediate communities or in the larger state of Maryland. There is a contraband memorial in Alexandria, Virginia, actually. Many people who were contrabands came to the DC area at one point, and then from there went out into other parts of Chesapeake and so forth. So again, this history is tied to many of the things that make us proud in Prince George's County. But I want you all again to remember that it's important to listen to your elders. It's important to take these stories and see your own history, see what's in your family tree. So again, if there's any Q&A, this is the good time to have that, and the time that we have. Type in your questions in the chat box and we will answer them, or the our guest speakers will answer them more specifically as best as possible. There was actually, by the way, Mr. Duba, are you here currently?
Yes, Gabriel, I am here. Yep.
Okay. Questions. Do your students have any questions? Now is the time. I have one. I just saw it pop in. For students who want to engage with the essay contest, art project, or soil project, when might they have opportunities to do that? This will go back to.
Yes, I think he's referring to the projects with the Lynching Memorial Project. We are currently in the process of developing a community remembrance project for Jurix and Piscataway. So use the information we shared with you and get in touch with us. And certainly there are many ways to contribute to that effort. The other thing in terms of the essay contest, just contact us, or I'm sure if Gabriel is willing to accept your names, he can share it with us. And the guidelines for the essay contest will be coming out within, sometimes in October. Diane, who is one of our co-chairs, has put in our website, I believe. So you can go to our website and all of that information will be there.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
And there will be scholarships and cash awards given. So please encourage everybody to participate.
No, I definitely look forward to engaging some students in those projects and giving them an opportunity to get hands-on with some of this that they've learned.
Great. The themes will be around historic events in Prince George's County, but it's also open to the students or the participants' idea of what they want to address in the county as well.
We do have one announcement, by the way. I want to make this announcement real quickly in the time that we have, because part of the work that we do of Remembrance means knowing how historical events can be remembered on any day of the week. And so for every student in the class who has joined today, one thing we want to offer for your edification is what's known as the History of Racial Justice Initiative calendars. These calendars are full color wall calendars that include hundreds of historical entries and 12 short essays highlighting historical events and issues in our nation's racial history. So quite literally, as you go through each day of the month, these calendars on each day of a particular month will show you an historical event that happened that pertained either to a racial injustice that occurred or a social action that a community and a nation did to rectify that problem. So we want to make sure that each student gets that out. So of course, as mentioned, the teachers, please let us know how many students you have so that we can make certain that they are able to get these calendars as a free gift for being participants in this program. Also, we do have another event coming up. I got one question. Where is the Freedmen Registry to search your family history? Contraband Historical Society, would you happen to have any information about that for people if they want to research their family history? I know the Freedmen's Bureau has been made available, but is there anything else beyond that that would help people to research the Freedmen experience?
You can also check the repository. The Mormon Tabernacle Church actually put together quite a repository of information. And we are developing more resources at the Casemate Museum. There are some registries. You can also go to the Library of Congress. You can find information in Maryland. We'll list the names of individuals who were employed by the Union forces. Shepard Mallory's name showed up. We think he, in fact, is the Shepard Mallory we've been talking about. And let me just add one piece here. You all are in Maryland. Maryland was a border state. I didn't get into all of that. A border state. That is, along with Delaware, Missouri, Kentucky, and later West Virginia, which grew out of Virginia. So Maryland didn't have contraband camps, so to speak. But that doesn't mean some contraband didn't make their way through there to freedom to get to Alexandria. We just know that there were not Union camps where contraband showed up in Maryland. As I said, they did not join the fight with the South against the North during the Civil War. However, there's still that connection. You have relatives, as Brother Graves pointed out, probably, who made their way from contraband camps, or definitely relatives in Maryland who, in fact, were in contact with contraband in the 1860s up to 1865, and definitely thereafter. So I just wanted to add that piece, so we didn't leave Maryland out of this.
Thank you so much for that. And also, I had one quick thought in the time that we do have. I would be remorse. It would be a problem for me not to bring this point up. There was an individual that was mentioned in another presentation. I forget her name, but she reminded me that there were women leaders involved, female leaders involved in the contraband experience. Am I correct on that in the time that we have?
Yes, you're probably thinking of Mary Peake, and she, of course, died of tuberculosis in 1862. She was a very outspoken lady. She's buried not far from the church I'm a member of, along with Shepherd Mallory, in fact. Women played a pivotal role, as we know, as laborers at the contraband camps. And I just want to say this. You need to know, and I'm sorry to have to say, that the contraband camps were not, how shall I put it? They were not places that were very, very good in many instances for the contraband. You had illnesses there, you had disease, you had exploitation. General Wool did not pay them as they were supposed to be paid. There was actually raping, unfortunately, of some individuals in Corinth, Mississippi. We're talking about young girls. Now, I don't want here to make everyone feel very melancholy, but these are the realities. And they worked hard, these contraband, and there were Northern or Union soldiers who were quite racist, and they let the contraband know that they didn't like them. And they told many of them, we're not fighting for you. We're fighting to preserve the Union. And so the racism that was still so much a part of the fabric then as it is now was present in those camps. It was not a very wonderful place to be in most instances. And William Roscoe Davis wrote about that. He was the keeper of the lighthouse in Hampton at Fort Monroe. And his descendants, like Talani Davis, some of you may know about Talani Davis. She spent time in Maryland. She's now in Wisconsin. They contributed quite a bit. There's William Roscoe Davis there. And he had property that was later purchased pretty much by the Episcopalian Church in Hampton. And it's across the street from the church I attend on Lincoln Street. He was quite a man who ran away and purchased his wife's freedom. So he thought, only to be told that she would not be freed immediately. So there's much to say about that. And I just don't want to leave anyone out, but it's difficult not to do so. So I just want to underscore the active role taken by Africans in America, soon to be known as contraband, and Benjamin Franklin Butler. Major General Benjamin Franklin Butler did not use the term contraband. I'm getting down in the weeds. That came later from William Budd and also newspapers. And so there's still much confusion about or disagreement about the term, but we'll take it. And we'll also take that these Africans in America sought their freedom. They resisted. And again, I don't want to get into all the organizations, about Black Power, about the NAACP, et cetera. We have a continuum of resistance. And let's contact individuals to get the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Bill passed. It's sitting there. Right to your senators. Again, since from 1918 and on, and we've been waiting this long. I'm a little
Yes.
tired, but I'm going to still let them know.
We definitely will let people know. That's one of the things we want you guys to know as students. One of the ways that you can get involved in this work is to actually know your local leadership, know the people at City Hall, know as students the people when it comes to your state legislators, legislative board, know the people that are your local U.S. attorneys, know the people that are U.S. attorneys, know the people in local government and state government and federal government, know where you can get involved. And then outside of that, know the history of your family tree, know the stories of elders who resisted, who didn't just wait for freedom, but fought back for it. And there's so much more that can be said, but we do pray that the information you've been given today inspires you to know that you can make a difference, you can get involved where you are. And as was mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, we are the ones that we've been waiting for. That bill that was mentioned with the Anti-Lynching Bill, if you go to the Prince George's County Lynching Memorial Project website, they have further information on the Emmett Till bill specifically. But again, please get involved where you can and know that you are part of this history. People that fled and fought for their own freedom, even when others didn't give it, they were young adults, as was mentioned before. They were students at one point in their communities. And that's a critical piece of history for each of us to keep in mind when it comes to resisting racial injustice and getting involved on the ground where we can be. So with that being said, we just thank you all for being here today. Also, if you want to find out more about what the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center does, you can go to our website at www.pgamcc.org. And we would love to stay in connection with you guys. There's going to be a survey that you'll be receiving from your teachers to get your thoughts on what was presented today. And again, on behalf of the Prince George's County African American Museum and Cultural Center, on behalf of the Prince George's Museum, on behalf of Prince George's County Lynching Memorial Project, on behalf of the Contraband Historical Society, and on behalf of you being our future leadership, we thank you guys for being here today. And we hope you have an amazing day. God bless.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Wonderful presentation.